The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Lab Manager Academy webinars, the brainchild of Lab Manager Magazine and sponsored by Thermo Scientific. My name is Jeff Tobe, and I hope you're enjoying the bizarre winter days, this 7th day of March in the northeastern U.S., where it's about 60 degrees Fahrenheit and feels more like May or June. Anyway, I'm excited to say that with your feedback, these webinars are just getting better and better. I hope that those of you who are loyal participants would agree. Please let us know, and many of you are. We really appreciate. If there are any topics you'd like to see addressed in upcoming sessions, we want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of these webinars. Just email me directly at jeff@jefftobe.com. That's Jeff @jefftobe.com. Today's webinar is Why Can't They Change and Be Happy About It? Once again, we've put ourselves with over 998 registrants. I think that's pretty close to 1,000. We could say 1,000. Before I introduce our presenter, please know that she welcomes your questions throughout the presentation. Many of you know the drill, but those just joining us for the first time, just type in your query in the chat box, and we'll try to get to it during our short time together. If we don't get to it today, our speaker will receive your questions offline and will answer you privately. Just watch for my message to you if there's anything wrong or if we have any questions of you. Also, I need to announce that every webinar is posted up on the web about 1 week before after airing, not before but after. So you can get the entire presentation if you like. You can just write down this web address for today's webinar. It's www.labmanager.com/changing. That's www.labmanager.com/changing, CHANGING. Or just go to the labmanager.com website. When you're ready, click on Webcasts and Podcasts to get all of the presentations. So let's get on with the reason you're here. Chris Clarke-Epstein has done many things in her life, from successfully managing a $7 million sales territory, raising 2 mostly self-sufficient children, and since 1984, building a thriving speaking, training, and consulting business. Her mother claims she gave her first presentation at age 6 when she was caught lining up the neighborhood children, collecting their nickels and promising them a narrated tour of her newborn brother. That's the entrepreneur in you, Chris, I know. These days, Chris works with clients around the world, helping people change by learning faster, working smarter, and laughing harder. Please help me in welcoming certified speaking professional Chris Clarke-Epstein.
Jeff, thank you so very much for that lovely introduction, and it is a great pleasure to spend this time with you and the participants in this webinar. We're talking about my favorite subject, which is change, and why it is as difficult as it is. And quite frankly, the reason change is difficult is people. People make change difficult. We do not live in a world of Spock from Star Trek where everything is logical. And those of us who tend to live our lives on the left side of our brain often think if we come up with a logical reason for a change and we announce said logical reason for a change, that people should just fall in line and work through it together successfully and cheerfully. It just doesn't work that way. Dick Axelrod said, even when your life depends on it, change is hard. My friend Marilyn Simonik said, technology moves at the speed of thought, people move at the speed of people. And part of our job as leaders is to figure out ways to help people move through change, and that's our topic for our time together today. Interestingly enough, there is a reason that change is difficult for us. It's a little thing called your comfort zone. Think of your comfort zone as the behavior you exhibit every time you go to dinner at your favorite restaurant. My guess is that everybody on the call has a favorite restaurant, and not only do you have a favorite restaurant, but you have a favorite food at your favorite restaurant. And every once in a while, when you get in your car and you're driving to your favorite restaurant, you say to yourself, you know what, tonight I'm going to do something different. I'm going to really read the menu. I'm going to listen to the specials from the server, and throwing caution to the wind, I'm going to order something completely new. And you have this resolve that says, I'm going to do that, and you march into the restaurant, you sit down, the server comes over and says, would you like to hear tonight's special? And you say yes, because this time you're really going to listen, and you listen, and then when they say, can I take your order, you order the same old thing. That's comfort zone behavior. It is the same behavior that drives us when we go to face-to-face conferences, and we sit with people whom we know and do not really like before we'll sit with somebody that we don't know. When I'm doing this live, I always have to let people look at the people they're sitting with. So if any of you are sitting around a conference table, you can look at your colleagues and say, no, 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 I really like you. That's why I'm sitting with you. But the trick is, for all of us, we will replicate this comfort zone behavior. And it's not that your comfort zone is bad. We all need to have the familiar as a part of our lives, especially when we're in times of great change and great upheaval. But the problem is, if we live our whole life, if we exist in our comfort zone, as so many people do, we miss the opportunity for growth or change, because you cannot grow and change when you're in your comfort zone by definition. What you have to do is get out of your comfort zone into your stretch zone. And when you get into your stretch zone, that time when you throw caution to the wind and order a different entree that has an ingredient that maybe you've never heard of before, that you have the opportunity to expand what it is that you know to be true in your life. That's when change can happen. That's when learning can happen. And so part of our jobs as leaders is to monitor how we exist in our relationship between our comfort zone and our stretch zone, how our people exist in their relationship between their comfort zone and their stretch zone, and how our organization exists in their time between their comfort zone and their stretch zone. I'm hoping that you're thinking of questions as we're moving along, and you'll send those through the chat function in, and Jeff's going to be aggregating those questions, and we'll stop in a little while to answer some of them, and then we'll have time at the end, because these are mind-stretching concepts. And when you exist in your stretch zone, one of the first things that you'll find is you will start behaving more like a 3-year-old who's constantly asking questions, because of course what they're trying to do is figure out the world. The whole world is a stretch zone for them. So comfort zone keeps you locked in place. Stretched zone is where you can learn and change. I would be remiss if I didn't explain that there is another part to this particular model, and that is the fetal position in the middle, which is your panic zone. If people get pulled too far too fast out of their comfort zone, they'll get scared, and fear drives you back into this tightly wound place called the panic zone, where everything feels dangerous. And so as a leader, part of our job is to watch for the symptoms of folks who are in their panic zone. They will shut down, they will cease communication, they take more sick days, they exhibit behaviors of a fearful person. And if you have somebody who's living in that space in the world, you need to tend to them, because you cannot learn or grasp the importance or the significance of change if you are in that fetal position in your panic zone. So this is a model that underlies the things that we're going to be talking about. It is a diagnostic tool. It's a kind of tool as a leader that you can share with your colleagues. It'll take you about 5 minutes to explain it. Everybody will resonate because they will have experienced it in their own life. And once you have it, you can use it as a diagnostic tool as you are moving through change, taking time out and saying, okay, how are we feeling right now? Are we in our comfort zone around this change, which may mean that we can accelerate? We may have a little more capacity. Are we feeling as though we're in our stretch zone and it feels good because we're learning and we're growing and we can see the progress, we can see the benefits? Or do we have anybody who's feeling overwhelmed, that they're in their panic zone, that their capacity is just stretched to the limit? So it becomes a diagnostic tool that you can use at any point in the change process. So it becomes foundational for what we're going to talk about next. And next is the number 5. We're going to look at 5 best practices of things that leaders need to be aware of as they manage and assist people walking through change. So the first of our 5 is that leaders must lead, which sounds so obvious. I debated whether I should actually bring it up, but the truth is sometimes leaders forget that the reason that they get paid the big bucks is to do their job as a leader. And part of their job as a leader is to pay attention to not only what's getting done. We all have responsibilities to get the job done. There's the task part of our work, and that's what runs our businesses. If we're not doing that, we cannot exist. As leaders, we also need to be paying attention to how the tasks are being tackled and taken care of, how relationships are existing. And so leaders have that dual responsibility, that it's not enough just to get the job done. But if you get the job done with people who are disgruntled and don't want to work together, you're not doing your job as a leader. So I want us to remember that the first thing we have to do is think about ourselves and leaders and our relationship with change, which brings us to a poll. So everybody cross their fingers so I get this right. We're going to launch a poll, and the poll is going to be launched right now. So you're going to get a poll, and the question is, what is your first reaction when you hear we're going to have to make some changes? Great, I'm excited to hear more, or okay, I probably can make that work, or hey, you've got to be kidding, more change? Be honest about your reaction. What is your reaction? I can see people are voting. This is really good. We're getting close to 50%. I'm going to close the poll after my countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Poll is closed, and I'm going to share the answers. So here we go. We've got 23% who are saying, woohoo, great, we got change to deal with. 63%, okay, I can probably make that work. And 14% who are saying, you have got to be kidding, not more change. I think because what we have here is a leadership group, that this is an honest representation of the bell curve. And in today's business, you've got most people who are fairly resigned that they're going to have to deal with change. What I want you to recognize is that this is probably not typical of the people that you're leading. So you have to lead when it comes to this change topic. So first step is that you need to be honest. Whoops, wait a minute, let me get rid of this. Okay. You need to be honest about your relationship with change, and know that it is okay to say to the people on your team, boy, this is tough. Wow, another change coming down the pike. You can say those things. You can acknowledge your own feelings, but what you have to do is quickly follow that up. Boy, I can't believe it. There's another change coming down the pike. I know we can handle it. That's part of being a leader. You don't have to pretend that it doesn't affect you, but you do have to do it in an optimistic way, dealing with the capacity of and your confidence in your team that they can deal with the change. So that was number 1. Jeff, do we have some questions that have come in? He wasn't exactly ready for this.
Absolutely. No, I wasn't. You're right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have given you a heads up.
I was so busy taking notes.
Oh, well, that's kind of cool. I'll like that one.
We did. We got quite a few questions.
Okay, great. Why don't you give me a couple?
Here's the first one. How does it get easier to enter the stretch zone from your comfort zone? What do you need to do?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. The way to make getting into your stretch zone easier is to get into your stretch zone more. It is a factor of just doing it, because the bonus is every time you take a step into your stretch zone, and you have the experience, what you're doing is you're slightly increasing your comfort zone. So I will use myself as an example. I don't like tomatoes. I don't like tomatoes. I was forced to eat way too many tomatoes in a bountiful garden year as a small child, so I don't like tomatoes. I do, however, like ketchup, and I like tomato soup, which people find to be odd. I just don't like the kind of slimy, fresh sliced tomatoes. And in the last year, I have tried to increase my capacity for eating tomatoes. So instead of just using tomato sauce when I cook, I use chopped tomatoes in spaghetti sauce now, and I've worked on eating that. I've now been able to go into Taco Bell and not make a big deal out of no tomatoes on my burrito, please, because they chop it up into little pieces. And I actually, completely by accident, ate half a sliced tomato on a hamburger because I just didn't notice that it was there, and it was halfway through before I realized it. I immediately took out the other half. But what I'm doing is moving the edge of my comfort zone when it comes to tomatoes out further. Now, the trivial example, but the principle still applies. So you do baby steps out of your comfort zone, and you are conscious that you are moving yourself out of your comfort zone, and that will make the transition to stretch zone behavior easier, personally
Great.
And collectively as a part of a team.
Great. So from those of us who like to eat tomatoes like apples, we'll use another example, but that's okay.
Exactly. And please know that for the most part of my life, I have been bequeathing you my share of sliced tomatoes.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How about this? I'm responsible for implementing a new data entry process for personnel who do not report directly to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for how to influence them to get outside their comfort zone?
First of all, you're going to have to invest some time finding out from them exactly what their comfort zone is, because just as Jeff mentioned, just because I have a comfort zone issue about tomatoes doesn't mean that other people have a comfort zone problem with tomatoes. So the first thing you have to do is spend some time talking, finding out what their fears and concerns are about this implementation. Because if you go off trying to solve a problem based on ignorance, you're not going to have much of a solution. So I would invest some time in conversation with some of the key stakeholders of that group that you need to influence and get their feelings for exactly what the boundaries of their comfort zone are. And then you'll be able to start creating a plan. We're going to talk in a few minutes. I'm going to give you a model for analysis that might be helpful in this case. I'll refer back to it.
Good. One more?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm one of those people who changes at the time, embraces change, leads change. Do I just have a giant comfort zone or all stretch zone? And why is change considered so difficult if there are people with large stretch zones among the people with similar stretch zones?
You know, and if you had to diagram that sentence, it would be quite a challenge. I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out the key to that particular question, and here's my best thinking on that. We are a sum total of life experiences, personality, career influences, all of these things in the mix that make us the people that we are today. And some people have had life experiences and have a personality that simply makes them much more comfortable outside of their comfort zone than inside their comfort zone. And and I happen to be one of those people too. I'm pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get me excited to go into my stretch zone as long as it doesn't involve tomatoes. So what you need to recognize, if you are one of those people who this stuff just is not an issue for you, you really have to work to be sensitive to recognize that there are other people who don't follow in that same thought process. I live in northern Wisconsin in a very rural area. I grew up in the city of Chicago. One of the things that was really difficult for me to understand when I moved up here was there are people who have lived their life in Marathon County and are darn proud of it. They have never been out of the county. And so their capacity to embrace stretch zone behavior is less because of their life experience. And I had to honor that and realize that giving examples about travel being broadening was not going to be particularly helpful for them. So we really need to meet people, especially on a team. When you're a leader, you need to meet people where they are. And we're going to talk a little bit about one size not fitting all in just a little bit.
Good. That's a good segue.
Okay.
So I'm gonna let you keep going, and we'll stop again at the end.
Okay, great. We're now going to go on to the second of our 5 best practices. This is people must want to change. You need to figure out how to present your change in a way that people see it in their best advantage. Dean Ornish said people don't resist change, they resist being changed. And I think that's a key thought to keep in mind. When the change is my idea, I think nothing of it. When the change is somebody else's idea, it starts being open to a lot of debate. Think about family. In my family, when I announced that I'm really going to try to eat healthier, and my husband, bless his heart, does the majority of our grocery shopping, and every time I make one of those big healthy eating announcements, I happen to notice that the stock of Ben & Jerry's ice cream goes up in the freezer. And it's not necessarily the kinds of Ben & Jerry's ice cream that he likes, it's the kind that I like. And he's not being difficult or mean or anything like that. It's just that he knows if I start talking about eating healthy, it's going to affect what happens to them. Now, when he thinks about eating more healthily and all of a sudden the fruit and vegetable bag gets to be the heaviest one that comes back from the grocery store, it's because it's his idea. Understand this comfort zone phenomenon is working again. When I change, it forces other people to have to change. And so if somebody wants to impose change on me, I have a different reaction than if I'm the one who's thinking up being changed. So I'd like to introduce you to 3 reactions of people when change is forced on them. First of all, there will be those people who support the change, and we call them evangelists. These are the people who will help you carry the message, and you need to know who those folks are. They may or may not have an official title of leader. And to the person who asked the question before about change that you have to work through another department that you don't supervise, but you have to influence, you need to know who those evangelists are. Who are those people who will carry the banner of the change? The second group of people who are oblivious to the change. These are people who have, it's like it's been a very confusing day and I have understood very little of it. And these people are called acluistics. They not only do they not have a clue, they don't even know that there's a clue to be found. And these are people who you are going to have to take by baby steps so they get to the point where they understand that this change is going to happen and why it's going to happen. The third group are the ones that you really need to pay attention to. These are the people who will actively work against the change. These are called your saboteurs. And you need to know who those folks are. And even though we don't want to believe that there are people who do that, anybody who's been in the business world for more than a week and a half will recognize that there are people like this who will actively work against the best interest of the team, the organization, even the customers sometimes. So we need to really hone in on these people who are actively working against the change. These are the people who are showing off resistance. And I want to share with you the fact that there are 3 levels of resistance, and there's a wonderful consultant by the name of Rick Maurer who has done the work on this resistance. His website is beyondresistance.com, and he has wonderful resources that he generously shares, so I would commend his work. And he talks about the 3 levels of resistance. Level 1 resistance is people who just don't get it. They don't get what's going on. These are sort of our acluistics folks. They don't understand what's going on, and so they're not involved, they're not participating, but it is because they don't understand what's going on. If you have level 1 resistance, what you need is you need to give them more information. This is where you need to have a great communication plan. Every major change should have a communication plan that's not just on a piece of paper, but that is actively looked at and worked through and thought through, because the level 1 resistance will go away when the good information gets out there for people. Now, understand there's level 2 resistance, and level 2 resistance will not be taken care of by just delivering more information. Level 2 resistance comes from the fact that on some level all change is about emotion. This is where people's emotions are what's causing the resistance. They are resisting because they don't like it. And they're, you know, I don't like this. I don't like a new software program. I don't like a new protocol. I don't like that we're changing our policies and procedures, because up till this point, I got it all figured out. I could operate on just manual. I didn't even have to engage my brain to make a telephone call. And now you're telling me we're getting a new phone system. You have no idea the amount of angst that people will happen if you change the phone system. I'm sure many of the people on the call have actually done this, and they know exactly how people will get anxious over doing something like that. But this is about my emotions. Giving me more information will not positively affect level 2 resistance. You can give information till the cows come home. I will still cross my arms across my chest and say, I don't like this, I don't want to do it, thank you very much, go away, leave me alone. So you have to do something different than giving more information. And what you have to do with level 2 resistance is you need to start talking about urgency. You need to build the case of why it is critical, and you need to inject some emotion into this case that you're building of why we have to do this now. We have to change these protocols to get ahead of some government regulations. And change that we can initiate is going to be better than somebody in the government telling us how we should run our lab. I think it's really important for us to match the emotion with some emotion on our own. If any of you have ever been in a customer service situation where you were upset and the person who was trying to take care of you said, now calm down, the last thing you wanted to do was calm down. So this is where we have to match that urgency a little bit. Level 3 resistance is where we get into the really tricky stuff. Level 3 resistance comes from the fact that they don't like you. And I know we all want to be liked, but there are some people, this is usually where your saboteurs come from. And it may not be you personally, it may be you and what you represent. It may be a change of regime within your organization, and you are considered to be the mouthpiece for the new regime, and I don't like the new regime, so therefore I'm not going to like you in any of the relationship that you represent. And generally speaking, level 3 resistance comes down to a matter of trust. People don't believe that they're being told the whole story. They don't believe that they're being given the straight goods. They think there's a hidden agenda. They think there's an ulterior motive. And if that's the case, what you have to do to take care of level 3 resistance is you have to work on regaining trust. This takes time. and it takes lots of effort, because we all know that trust is something that builds over time. It gets broken in a nanosecond, and if you are trying to rebuild it, it takes even longer. So when you are looking at level 3 resistance, it's really important that you pick the right idea to start with. So pick a part of the change that you are going to launch with that is a short-term, the ever-popular low-hanging fruit. Look for some of those initiatives where you can do some things that will take a little bit shorter time to accomplish, and that you move forward and can celebrate some small wins, and people will see that you have their best interests at heart, and you can start that process of regaining trust. So peg your level of resistance. Where is it coming from? Is it, I need more information, I need to know the emotional reason why I should participate in this change, or I need to regain my trust in the system that we're operating in. You have to peg your actions to the right level of resistance. So number 2, people have to want to change. Number 3, people must know what to do and how to do it. And this is the thing I was going to reference back to our earlier question. If you envision taking well, let's say we have a team meeting, and we know that we've got some resistance to change, and we want to do something to do a little diagnostic work for what's going on. And what I want you to do is put up 3 flip charts on the wall, and you're going to label each one of the flip charts. The first flip chart is going to be labeled control. The second flip chart is going to be labeled influence, and the third flip chart is going to be labeled no control. And then you're going to give everybody Post-it notes and give them the assignment, when it comes to this change, what are things that we control, what are things that we influence, and what are things that we have no control over, and have them write down one thought or idea per Post-it notes, and then start sticking them up on the flip charts on the wall. And Jeff, I'm going to pause for just a second and ask you if I'm the only one hearing the scratchy sounds, if I should be concerned about that.
We're okay, Chris. I apologize. It's actually from my end.
Okay.
But we're going to take care of that right now.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something I was doing. Okay, so we've got our flip charts up on the wall, and everybody's writing madly on their Post-it notes, and you're putting them up there, and then you're going to have to do a little analysis, clump and cluster, so you're going to put like things together. So ultimately what you're going to have is you're going to have a list of things that you have control over, a list of things that you can influence, and a list of things that you have no control over. First thing is, people are probably going to be surprised that there are more things on the control and influence than they expected. Now, if it takes a while, you might have to prompt them. And it would probably be a good idea if you've done this before you start it with the team, and you can have some ideas you could be putting up there. The trick is that you need to look at the fact that the no control list is what most individuals and most teams will spend the most time on. And by definition, you have no control over that. So there is no reason to spend time on those issues, but it's very tempting. This is where people can whine and, dare I say, bitch about things quite convincingly. And as a leader, you're going to have to exert some discipline, because once you've gone through this, you need to take that list of no control, set a kitchen timer, let everybody whine and complain for 20 minutes, and when the timer goes bing, then what you need to say as the leader of the group, we are not spending more time on this because it's counterproductive. And then my personal favorite thing to do at that point is to have an old metal garbage can and burn the list, but that depends on your sprinkler systems in your meeting room, and and your security codes and all of those kinds of things. So I leave it up to you. In some way, with a dramatic flair, you need to dispose of the no control list. If those things get talked about again in team meetings, you need to remind the team, wasn't that on our no control list? And by the way, we're not talking about that anymore, because you've got plenty to do with the things that are on your control and influence list. That's where you build your action plan. And that's where you focus your attention. How do we get to those influencers? How do we get a bigger budget? How do we get some negotiating power on the start date or the end date? How do we make sure that we've got everybody with their skill set at a level so that they are ready to hit the ground running once we institute this policy or procedure? So you need to make sure that you are focusing your action plan work on things that you can control and influence. You will be amazed if you do this activity with a team of people how it can start changing the tenor of the discussion. And if you have people who are saboteurs, who are fixated on things that you really have no control over, which, by the way, sometimes is that the change is going to happen. Some of us are in environments where we have absolutely no control whether this change is going to happen or not. And if you have the naysayers who continually harp on that, and you can continually say, wait a minute, that's on our no control list, you can point them out for their behavior, and the rest of the team won't be as affected by that behavior, especially if they see you as the leader being consistent around not allowing that to overcome the key. So here are two things that I would like you to think about in this particular area, and that is check your onboarding and training programs, because how you bring people onto your team, the kind of mindset about change that you are developing so that people know from the get-go that we deal with change a lot in this organization. We have change that's coming at us all the time, and you let people know that from the very beginning when they come on board, and then you are training them so that their skill set, they feel confident that they know what they need to do and how to do it. Those things play into this part of best practices, which takes us to number 4. People must be working in the right climate. This is something as leaders that we own. We own the climate on our teams, and we own it whether we pay attention to it or not. And I would suggest that if you're not paying attention to the climate that you have created, then it's probably not going to be the kind of climate that is going to be conducive to people being a little more comfortable with dealing with change. We've got some research from the Gallup folks who did their fine job of looking at why do followers follow, and they found 4 characteristics. Here they are: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Trust that you are going to give me the straight skinny, that I can go to you. And by the way, there are times as a leader where you cannot disclose all that you know. And you know that you know something that you can't tell, and your people know that you know something that you can't tell. It is okay to say, I am not able to discuss that at this point. However, as soon as I can, you can believe that you'll hear it from me first, and then make good on that promise. The number 1 demoralizing behavior for people in the workplace is when they pick up the newspaper or they talk to a customer or client on the phone and find out something about their company that the outside world knew before they knew. And so I need to trust that I will hear from you what I need to hear when I need to hear it. So don't get yourself in a snit that you can't always answer people's questions. Just answer them honestly. Compassion means that you actually know the kind of world that your people are existing in. It makes you credible to know, for people to know that you understand the pressures of the work that they're doing. Stability does not mean not change. Stability means that somebody's paying attention so that our changes fit a pattern that cause us the ability to continue to exist as we move into an uncertain future. So stability is important, not in the realm of nothing ever changes. It's that changes that happen are purposeful, and that you help people understand that. And hope is for a positive future. And I'm sure the Gallup people didn't do this, but they could have just listened to the Dixie Chicks, because in one of their songs they have this great line that says, "I don't have all the answers, but I hope." And to me, that embodies what leaders need to do if they want to be a part of this number 4 best practice, which is people working in the right climate. I want a leader who may not have all the answers, but has a lot of hope that they're willing to share. You need to understand that when you're going through times of change, there are going to be oops moments. People are going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. The worst thing is a climate where people are punished for their mistakes. Because the minute that you do that, if you have hired smart people will watch somebody get blasted for making and confessing a mistake, and then they're smart. They know, I'm never going to do that. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't make mistakes. They just won't confess the mistakes. What you want is a climate that allows people to say, you know what, I tried something new, and it didn't work out. Here are the lessons that I learned. There is a story about IBM, and I don't know if it's true or not, but here's the deal. If some of you know that it's not true, I don't want to know that it's not true, because it's such a great story. I love to tell it. And the story is that back in the day when Tom Watson Sr. was running the ship, there was a young man who made a mistake to the tune of $2.5 million, when $2.5 million was real money. And as the story goes, he studied what he had done wrong. He wrote an exhaustive report of the lessons learned, and he wrote his letter of resignation, and he went into Tom Watson Sr.'s office, explained what had happened, and said, I brought you 2 documents. Here's the report with the lessons learned. Here's my letter of resignation, so you didn't have to ask for it. And I just wanted to share this with you. And Tom Watson Sr. is reported to have looked at the 2 documents, thought for a little while, handed the letter of resignation back to the young man and said, young man, I'm not losing you. I just spent $2.5 million training you. So it is about mistakes will happen. I understand what we really need to do is make more mistakes sooner. This goes back to our comfort zone. We make little mistakes getting out of our comfort zone, which prepares us for running the analysis of the risk on bigger things. So what we need to do is, you as a leader need to be highly visible and expect setbacks. What the tendency is for most leaders when there are problems is they disappear. And especially they will justify their disappearance by saying things like, well, we really don't have anything to tell people, so we won't say anything. If you remember nothing else from our time together, I want you to remember this. No group of human beings has ever gathered together in a conference room when the leadership team goes silent and said, you know, they're not talking to us. I bet you they are thinking great thoughts, and they're working on making this positive. No group has ever done that. They say to themselves, something bad is coming. In the absence of information, people, human beings, make things up, and they always make them up from a negative perspective. So be highly visible and expect setbacks. Address mistakes as opportunities to learn, and create a culture where what it is that we do is we make mistakes, we learn our lessons, and then we go forward so we can do new and creative things. Which takes us to number 5, which is people must be rewarded for changing. Now, when it comes to rewards, one size does not fit all. So you cannot think about a blanket here's how I'm going to reward everybody, because what seems to be a reward to one person isn't going to be a reward to another person. So we're back to the notion that you need to develop relationships with people so that you know what what feels like a reward to different people. My friend Mary Mark Dante said, even adult professionals will kill for a bag of M&Ms. Sometimes we get ourselves so caught up on rewards having to be big things that we forget that little things make a difference. In my programs, I give out gold stars all the time. You can't imagine how senior executives of Fortune 500 companies are pouting in the corner because they didn't get a gold star. The issue is people want to be recognized for what they've done. A reward and recognition system from a leader says, I'm paying attention and I recognize what you're doing. So celebration is another way that people get rewarded. And what happens in most projects, especially big projects, is we plan on having the celebration at the end, and unfortunately it becomes too little, too late. And in most team environments that are very flux, by the time you get to the end of a project, half the people who worked on the project have moved on to something else. So just like you had a communication plan earlier, you need to have a reward and recognition plan that goes along the process. What are the small wins? What are the milestones that we've identified? And let's pause, take a time out, and let's celebrate the fact, and let's hand out some gold stars. And as a leader, you ought to have a pocket full of gold stars. I have a sticker that says I've entered the stretch zone today that I carry with me all the time, and I give them out to people when I see that they're doing something that is making them slightly uncomfortable, and I say, here, I'm noticing what you're doing. You can't imagine how that has an impact. It doesn't have to be a big thing, it just has to be something. So think about, how are you going to keep people involved and acknowledged throughout the whole change process, because that will be the shining light of working through a change. So we are getting close to where we're going to ask some more questions, and I just want to recap because we've looked at 5 best practices. Leaders must acknowledge their own relationship to change, and they must step up to really being leaders and taking responsibility and accountability for this process. People must want to change. We need to help them understand why this change is to their benefit. People must need to know what to do and how to do it. They must be working in the right climate, and we need to reward them for their efforts and their getting out of their comfort zone. So I'm going to give you a homework assignment, actually 2 homework assignments. The first one is, if you haven't already read Daniel Pink's wonderful books, I would like you to put that on your reading list. His first book, A Whole New Mind, says why right-brainers will rule the future. And if you pride yourself on being a very left-brain logical thinker, this will give you some aha moments. And his newest book, which is called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates People, really helps think through how motivation is not necessarily what we thought it was, and I think will be helpful to you. So that's homework assignment number 1. Here's homework assignment number 2, to remember that the purpose of all learning is change. So the fact that you came to this webinar today said that you wanted to learn something, and the reason you did that was that there was something you wanted to do differently. So in that spirit, I will ask you this question: what are you going to change? And I would love for you to write down on whatever piece of paper you've been taking notes something that you want to do as a result of our time together. And I know that Jeff's going to reiterate the fact that I'm willing to answer questions via email. You'll be able to contact me, and I'd be glad to help you, encourage you on your change. And who knows, if you write to me about a change that you embarked on and what happened, I might just have to send you a gold star. And that takes me to my last slide before we open it up to questions again. And it is my favorite, as I call it, dead white guy's quote. He's been dead for a really long time, several thousand years. It's a Seneca quote, and he said, "It's not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." Change is difficult when we don't dare. That step out of your comfort zone is sometimes not all that big of a thing, but as long as you don't have the courage to do it, You're falling into Seneca's warning. It's not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult. So what I would love to do is dare to answer some of your great questions. Jeff, that would be your clue.
We've got lots of them, Chris.
Oh, good.
What do you do when it seems that a person's panic zone and comfort zone are the same and there is no stretch zone?
Besides going back to school to become a psychotherapist, I think that if I had a person like that on my team, I would want to spend some really quality time with that person to try to figure out what makes them tick. Now, it is not your job as a leader to psychoanalyze and treat the people on your team. This is why companies have EAP programs. If, in fact, you really have somebody who's in a perpetual state of panic, you need to build the relationship in such a way that you can suggest to them that they get some help, because that is not normal, nor is that a way anybody can successfully live their life and do their job in today's changing environment. So it's outside of your pay grade, except for the fact that you need to help them feel at least comfortable in accessing some professional assistance. This is one of those questions that if we had magic fairy dust, I would share it and we could sprinkle people, but sometimes people do have some issues going on in their life that have to be taken care of.
Great. Well, just a quick one, but is change better accepted if explained or while it's occurring or before?
I think all of the above. Here is one of those things that I often think about. Leaders have bright ideas to do change, okay? And it often comes when I go on vacation and I went to the bookstore at the airport and I bought the latest business book, and I come back and I say, woohoo, we're going to go from good to great, and or we're going to reinvent the organization, or whatever the title of the day is. And what we forget is that I read the book. And I got to mull it all over. And so now I'm coming back and I'm springing it on people who've never even heard of the book. So you need to do a lot of upfront level setting to make sure everybody understands what's going on, what's pushing us out of this particular collective comfort zone. So it's before, and as things unfold, I need to keep reminding people of why we started down this path, and I need to think of it this way. If you were planning a vacation, if you're like me, one of the things you might do is you would go to the bookstore and you get a travel book, or you do some Google searching of the place that you want to go, and you do the reading about it, and you make your plans, and then you start on the trip, and all of a sudden you go back to the book, or you pull out your file of Google stuff, or you fire up your iPad and you start looking, and all of a sudden that stuff has different meaning to you now because you're actually at the destination, or you're on your way. So you want to be doing this all along. It is part of that communication plan that you've thought through the whole thing. Not only does one size not fit all with rewards, one size does not fit all with communication. Here's something I can tell you after doing this work for close to 30 years now. I have never had a human being who was a part of an organization come up to me and say, could you talk to the leaders in our organization and ask them to stop communicating because we are getting way too much information. I have never had that happen. So no matter how good you are at communication, at communicating the reasons for the change, the rationale behind the change, you are not doing as much as you could do. And remember that communication is not just the why, it's also the context. What is the context for this change that's pointing us in this direction?
That's a great segue to another question that came right after that, and that is basically, what if you're not confident with that the change can happen? You're addressing your staff when you don't believe what you're saying because it came from up above.
If you are in that situation, this goes back to our leaders must lead. You need to really do the work on your relationship with the change. And if you are getting marching orders that you do not agree with, you have some choices. One choice is to go back to the people who are telling you to march and say, I need more information. I need you to help me understand that. I need you to help me really know the urgency behind this. So you need to go to your leaders and get what you need in order to do it. Or in a few rare choices, if you are being asked to do something that truly violates your value system, you may have to make a really tough decision yourself about, can I carry this forward? Here's the leadership bottom line. I can get together with my peers if I'm in a leadership role, and I can talk this out and through with my peers. I can go to the people above me in the hierarchy, and I can talk to them and express my doubts and concerns and fears. I can do either of those two things. What I can't do is I cannot let that go out down within the organization. I can't get the people on my team and say, you know what, those idiots are at it again. You're not going to believe what it is they want us to do. I can't and call myself a leader. It just isn't done.
Okay, how about this? I'm a new leader, and the previous leader would institute changes and then have very poor follow-through. Now I'm trying to get my team on board, and they're fearful about embracing any changes I want to make. How do we deal with that?
I am so glad that this person asked that question, because this is the leaders shooting themselves in the foot model of change management. They announce the big change, they have the rally, they have the kickoff meetings, and then 2 months later nobody can remember what's going on. And again, you hired smart people, and what you've taught them is if you keep your mouth shut and you keep your head down, the stuff will go away. If you're not exhibiting follow-through and accountability on a leadership level when it comes to change, don't be surprised that you are breeding skepticism, and you're getting exactly what you deserve. Now, this poor person is just stepping into the reality. He doesn't, or she doesn't deserve that, but it exists there. I think you need to have a forthright conversation with your team that calls the elephant in the room. I've been here now for 3 months or whatever it is, and one of the things that I have observed is that in the past, ideas were floated, they were talked about, and there was not follow-through. And when that happens, been there myself in other places, it breeds skepticism. Like, we really don't have to get involved because it'll go away. I want you to know I am not that kind of a person. Here's what you need to know about working with me. I'm the kind of person that if we get an idea, we are going to sit around a table, we're going to thrash it out. If we come to the conclusion or the decision is made, however that decision gets made, if we come to that decision that we're going to do it, then we are going to do it. We are going to follow through. We are going to have accountability in place. And you watch, because that's the way I operate. And so it's sort of announcing that there's a new sheriff in town. And you don't have to dwell a long time that the other person was wrong or bad. You just have to say that's one way. And by the way, that is more common, that behavior of not following through is more common than the behavior of follow through and accountability.
Super. Well, I'd like you to get to your last slide. I know you have an offer to make to everybody. And while you're doing that, let me just mention to everybody that the questions we don't get to, I'll reiterate, Chris has agreed to answer them offline. We'll get to her the questions. We have copies of them and your email address. So we'll get them to her offline, and she'll get an answer out to you individually when she can.
Absolutely. Thanks. I write a weekly e-letter. It's never more than 4 lines long because I don't have time to write it and you don't have time to read it. It goes to about 6,000 people around the world. People say they love it because it's short, sometimes it's funny, and it's about change, always motivational, food for thought. And if you would like to be included in that, if you send me an email with change in the subject line to chris@change101.com, we will get you subscribed to Thinking for a Change.
Excellent. I got to tell you, I am a subscriber, so I'm telling everybody this is a great, simple way to get some ideas about change and Chris's thoughts. So sign up today.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your insights. Again, email Chris at chris@change101.com if you have any other questions. And remember, Chris does speak and train and consult, and like all of our presenters, is available to come into your organization to speak or train or consult. I really hope you enjoyed the presentation. I would like to thank our sponsor, Thermo Scientific, without whom the webinar series would not be possible. Next month, I'm excited, and for those of you staying on the line for a minute, I got to tell you that this topic was the #1 asked for topic in a survey we did about 6 months ago with all of you. And so next month, mark your calendars for the first Wednesday of the month for How to Motivate Employees in Today's Lab with professional speaker and author Al Walker. Please mark your calendars for Wednesday, April the 4th at 1 p.m. and watch your email for more details. Again, it's my honor and my privilege to be your host every month. And until next month, this is Jeff Tobe urging you to keep coloring outside the line.